Takumi finds himself teleported to another world, standing before the goddess Nolan. The first thing she does is offer him a sincere apology, explaining that his summoning was a complete mistake. She reveals that when an invocation spell is cast, it usually selects a group of losers from Earth to transport them to another world. However, Takumi's life was going pretty well, so he shouldn't have been included. Unfortunately, due to an error, he was dragged into the summoning process along with everyone else. The blame falls on the Holy Empire of Sidonia, which cast the spell recklessly. Since Takumi wasn't meant to be summoned, Nolan brought him directly into her presence instead of sending him to Sidonia with the other summoned heroes. Takumi asks Nolan if she can simply send him back to Earth since his summoning was a mistake. Unfortunately, she explains that it's impossible. Out of anger towards Sidonia for using the forbidden summoning spell, Nolan erased the magical laws of this world, making it impossible for anyone to travel between worlds. As a result, Takumi is permanently trapped in this place. To make matters worse, the summoning process technically killed him. When Takumi realizes he's now a ghost without a body, he panics, but the goddess reassures him that there's nothing to worry about. Although she can't send him back to Earth, she can provide him with a new body and help him start a new life as a citizen of this world as an apology for her part in the mistake. Takumi, with few options, agrees to be reborn in this world. The goddess is pleased to hear this because it makes things much easier for her. She tells him to open his status screen to check his new life. When Takumi does, he discovers that Nolan plans to give him a 17-year-old body, even though he's 40. Nolan tells him not to worry about the minor details. More importantly, he still needs to choose a job. She explains that there are two main classes of jobs. If Takumi wants something combat-focused, he can choose from options like Sword Knight, Knight, or Hunter. However, if that doesn't appeal to him, he can always choose a production job. Takumi, not particularly interested in combat, chooses a production-focused job. Nolan proceeds to embed the job into his soul, along with several additional blessings, before sending him on his way, completely forgetting to give him any kind of tutorial. Takumi suddenly lands in the middle of a forest, and after struggling to get up, he sees his reflection in a nearby river. It is then that he realizes he has truly become a different person, and to his astonishment, his arthritis has disappeared. Deciding to make the most of his new situation, he checks the bag the goddess left with him and finds food rations and money, meaning he doesn't have to worry about starving for now. Takumi opens his status screen and sees that Nolan really went all out, granting him an impressive array of useful abilities, including elemental magic. He decides to try it out, and as he extends his hand and chants Water Ball, an orb of water instantly forms in his palm. The other elements work just as well, and Takumi is able to use them effortlessly on his first try. With his new magical abilities mastered, he begins to think about his next steps and decides to head to the nearest village. While walking, he finds a nice-looking stick in the middle of the road. Using his appraisal ability, he examines it and discovers that it's high-quality wood from a monster and would be really useful for crafting things like magic staffs and spears. Takumi decides to test his crafting ability and uses the wood to create a spear. The material works so well that he decides to look for more useful plants nearby. He finds a great quantity and spends the next hour collecting them. However, he's unsure what to do with all the plants, as they definitely won't fit in his bag. Just as he's about to leave them behind, he remembers his item box ability and uses it to store the plants. Suddenly, Takumi hears a scream nearby. Moments later, a small girl comes running from the bushes toward him, pleading for help because a monster is chasing her. When Takumi turns to look at the creature, he finds a huge rabbit with horns charging toward him at incredible speed. The rabbit almost runs him over, but in the last moment, Takumi panics and accidentally stabs the rabbit in the head, killing it instantly. He is shocked that a beginner like him was able to defeat such a creature, and assumes it must be thanks to the goddess Nolan's blessing. In reality, it was pure luck. After the fight, Takumi is given the warrior job title, much to his displeasure, as he was hoping to avoid combat altogether. However, he puts that aside for now and checks to see if the girl is okay. She introduces herself as Molly and reassures him that she is fine, explaining that she was gathering herbs but wandered too far from the village of Boar and ended up being attacked. When Molly mentions the village, Takumi becomes excited and asks if he can go there. Molly agrees to guide him but first points out that rabbit meat is delicious and asks if he plans to take it with him. Realizing it would be a waste to leave it behind, Takumi stores the rabbit in his item box. Only then does he realize he's just revealed his item box ability to Molly, something he intended to keep a secret. Resigned to his horror, Takumi follows Molly as she begins their journey toward the village. Meanwhile, the other people who were summoned have just arrived at the Sidonia Empire, and they are incredibly confused about what is going on. None of them are injured, but they have no idea where they are. Suddenly, they hear someone calling them heroes. A woman approaches, and she tells them that they are no longer in their original world, and that they have been summoned to use their power as heroes to save this world. She introduces herself as the Empress of the Sidonia Empire, Elizabeth, and the expression on her face makes the young people realize that she is highly suspicious. At that moment, the unique ability of one of the girls activates, and it seems that the goddess granted her the blessing of revelation. If she follows her instincts, the correct answer will come naturally. At that moment, Akane's instinct tells her that Elizabeth is a traitor, so she cannot trust her. Later, when Takumi arrives in the village of Bard, Molly's parents come out to greet him and thank him for rescuing their daughter. Molly's father introduces himself as Bunga, while her mother is named Martha. They express their admiration for Takumi, assuming that he must be a very responsible person to have traveled such a long distance on his own. Takumi takes the opportunity to ask if it would be possible to stay in the village for a while, explaining that he had nowhere to go. Bunga and Martha warmly welcome him but mention that, unfortunately, there is no inn in the village, so currently, there is no place for him to stay. However, they suggest a solution. The villagers can build him a house. Soon, the whole village gathers around an empty plot of land, ready to begin. Wanting to contribute in some way, Takumi decides to use his earth magic to level the ground and create the foundation. It's the first time he uses magic on such a large scale, and the effort almost causes him to faint from mana exhaustion. The villagers are amazed that Takumi can use earth magic so easily. Takumi asks them if they think he did something strange, but they assure him not to worry. Since he already took care of the foundation, the others begin working on building his house. By the next morning, Takumi's house is finished. Thanks to his carpentry, blacksmithing, and sewing skills, Takumi manages to make a good set of furniture for himself, but there's something else he has wanted to try. He received a bunch of minerals from the village blacksmith, Boron, and wants to try using alchemy to extract metal. He encounters iron, silver, copper, and even magical iron ores. He starts with iron and decides to try making a bar. Normally, this process would require a large furnace and several hours of work, but thanks to his alchemy skill, he can do it instantly. However, the process consumes a significant amount of his mana. His first attempt at extracting the mineral is a success, and Takumi is excited by the result. Eager for the possibilities, he decides to extract as much as he can to have enough materials to work with later. After a few hours, Molly stops by Takumi's house to bring him some dinner. When she opens the door, she is horrified to find him collapsed on the floor, completely exhausted. It turns out that Takumi had overexerted himself with the mineral extraction and had come dangerously close to dying from mana exhaustion. Fortunately, Martha and Bunga give him a recovery potion, bringing him back to normal. Although Takumi is eager to continue practicing his alchemy, he promises them that he won't overdo it again. Over time, Takumi extracts a large amount of iron, copper, and even a bit of gold, which allows him to craft many useful tools. Once he finishes his alchemy practice, he spends time with Boron at the forge, learning how to craft all kinds of weapons. The sword he forges turns out to be of great quality, and once they finish making the sheath, it will be complete. Takumi's blacksmithing skill is now level 40. So he decides it's time to move on to something else. Takumi approaches Bunga and asks if he can borrow a couple of potions. Bunga agrees without hesitation but mentions that the potions he has are basic and may not be very useful. Takumi reassures him that it's fine, explaining that he just needs an example to use as a template. He plans to create his own potions using herbs he collected from the forest. Impressed by Takumi's initiative, Bunga offers his full support and even says he'll buy some potions from him once the first batch is ready. Takumi thanks Bunga and, with the basic potion in hand, begins to craft his own version. He uses kilcock leaves and water to create it, carefully following his process. Once finished, he pours the concoction into a glass vial and compares it with the one Bunga provided. Both are blue, but the potion Takumi made is noticeably more blue and seems to contain traces of magic. Despite its promising appearance, Takumi is unsure if it's a success. He knows he needs to test it to confirm that it's safe, but the thought of potentially poisoning himself makes him hesitant to take the risk. To develop tolerance to the poison, He decides to eat anything questionable he can find until he's on the brink of death, and then uses healing magic to recover. After a couple of hours of this self-destructive experiment, he feels absolutely terrible. On the bright side, healing himself so many times has granted him the purification skill, which will definitely be useful at some point. While Takumi is recovering, he hears a noise behind him and finds a huge boar staring at him. The boar is clearly hostile, so Takumi readies his lance to defend himself. However, when the boar charges, the lance breaks upon impact, leaving the boar injured and vulnerable. Desperate, Takumi uses all kinds of magic at his disposal, but none seem to harm the boar. As if things couldn't get worse, he sees a venomous spider sneaking up behind him, ready to attack. Takumi realizes he's completely cornered. Instead of attacking Takumi, the spider focuses its attention on the boar, redirecting its attack and causing it to miss. However, the boar does not retreat, and he continues his attack, leaving Takumi with little time to react. So far, none of his physical attacks have worked, but there's still one tactic he hasn't tried. At 10:09, when the boar charges again, he jumps into the air, and at the moment of impact, he uses his alchemy skill on the boar's head to decompose it. His quick action results in survival from the encounter. Now that he's safe, Takumi decides to check on the state of the spider, since it helped him earlier. The spider is in very bad condition after being struck by the boar. Takumi decides to heal it so it doesn't die. Afterward, he stands up to return to the village but receives a notification saying that he has successfully tamed the spider. He hadn't realized that it was possible to tame a spider but hesitates to take it with him since spiders are considered dangerous monsters. The spider looks at him with an adorable gaze, its sweet little eyes, and despite everything, Takumi decides to accept it as his pet, officially naming it Maple. Soon after, Takumi returns to the village, proudly showing the huge boar he managed to kill. The villagers are impressed by his feat, but their amazement grows even more when they see the spider he's tamed. No one had ever done anything like that before, leaving them in awe of Takumi's abilities. Setting that aside, Takumi suggests the villagers share the boar because there's no way he can finish it alone. That evening, the village organizes a grand feast in his honor. While everyone enjoys the festivities, Banka approaches Takumi with valuable boar materials and advises him to sell them in the nearby city of Bolton. Takumi decides that Bolton will be his next destination. Meanwhile, the goddess Nolan has been watching Takumi and is pleased with how things are going for him. One of her fellow goddesses questions her intentions, asking what she's trying to achieve by giving Takumi such extraordinary treatment. After all, she provided him with a special body, a unique blessing, and even sent him a year before Sidonia activated the summoning spell. Nolan, however, simply responds that she doesn't have a specific motive, she's just doing what she believes is right. One morning, Takumi wakes up to find himself tied to the bed, immediately realizing that Maple is the one responsible. Maple apologizes, explaining that she felt very lonely because Takumi has been so busy lately and just wanted to get his attention. Takumi reflects and understands that he's been so focused on his work that he hasn't spent much time with Maple. Deciding to make it up to her, he takes the day off and dedicates it to playing with her, making her incredibly happy. At that moment, Martha enters with Takumi's lunch. It seems something strange is happening between Takumi and Maple, but Takumi reassures her that it's not what it seems. Martha believes him, but she can't help noticing how beautiful the silk Maple produces looks. She plans to extract as much silk as possible from the spider. Later that day, Martha manages to create a shirt made of spider silk, and all the women in the village are fascinated by the fabric's texture. Takumi is surprised to learn that spider silk is in such high demand. The women explain that spider silk is considered a luxury material, generally accessible only to nobles. Martha asks Maple if she can produce more silk for her. Maple begins to release it, but the process is slow and complicated, meaning she won't be able to play with Takumi for a while. Takumi is a little disappointed, as he wanted to spend more time with Maple, but he understands and has other things to do, so it doesn't bother him too much. About a month has passed since Takumi arrived in the village, and he plans to head to the city to study alchemy. However, he can't easily say goodbye to the villagers after spending so much time with them. Takumi heads to the blacksmith shop to meet Torin and continue perfecting his blacksmithing skills. In no time, they manage to craft a chest plate that fits Takumi perfectly, along with a pair of boots with iron tips. Burrow mentions that the boots might come in handy if Takumi ever needs to kick something, but Takumi quickly clarifies that he has no intention of fighting since his real goal is to become an alchemist. At that moment, Banka appears, happy to see that Takumi's armor is finally finished. However, he admits that he's going to miss Takumi when he leaves. He knows Takumi can't stay here forever if he wants to expand his production business. It's logical that he heads to the city, where he can sell more products and get a reliable supply of materials. A merchant from Bolton will arrive in the village in a few days, so Banka arranges for Takumi to travel back with him to Bolton. Though they are sad to see him go, they understand and encourage Takumi to start preparing his things. Grateful for all their support, Takumi thanks them and heads home to pack. On the way, he runs into Martha, who is carrying a bucket of meat. Curious, he asks what she's doing, and Martha explains that she's on her way to dispose of the guts of a horned rabbit she caught. Banka mentions that although the guts are considered the tastiest part of the rabbit, they require careful processing to remove any diseases or parasites. This village doesn't have the necessary equipment to do it, so the meat has to be thrown away to prevent anyone from getting sick. However, Takumi tells her that it won't be necessary since he can purify the meat. He crouches down and uses purification magic to make the meat in the bucket safe to eat. Though Martha is grateful, she's also surprised that Takumi can use light magic. She warns him that he probably shouldn't reveal he can use light magic when leaving the village, as very few people in this world are capable of it. If people found out, it could attract a lot of unwanted attention. Takumi takes her warning seriously, and he promises to be cautious when revealing his powers. However, while staying in the village, he decides to use his abilities to improve the quality of life as much as possible using earth magic. He builds a solid brick wall to improve the village's security. For added comfort, he installs a water pump and creates other useful amenities. When he finishes, the village has completely transformed, looking like a whole new place. When the merchant arrives, he barely recognizes the village. Bunga greets Peipek, and after closing a deal, Takumi approaches to begin their journey. Peipek has already heard a lot about Takumi from Bunga, so he introduces himself, and everyone asks if he's all set. Takumi assures them he hasn't forgotten anything, but has something he wants to give them. He pulls a potion from his bag and hands it to Bunga, mentioning that he left about 100 bottles of it at Bunga's house in case of an emergency. He wants them to use it to heal wounds. The merchant, surprised by the potion's quality, asks to examine it more closely. After inspecting it, he confirms it is a high-level potion. Soon, the villagers gather to say goodbye to Takumi. Peipek says he'll wait for the farewells to finish before leaving. Molly says goodbye to Maple, who is sleeping in Takumi's sack, and Martha gives a gift she made for her and the other women, a spiderweb fabric. Takumi is truly grateful for their thoughtful gift and thanks them again for being so kind, despite not knowing him for long. He climbs into the cart, and the villagers give him a warm and emotional farewell, assuring him that he will always have a place in their village. As Peipek and Takumi head toward Bolton, the merchant comments on how much the villagers value Takumi. Even the others in the cart can feel that Takumi was like family to them, and the farewell deeply touches Heath's heart. By the way, the group heading to Bolton introduces themselves. The blonde boy is Heath, the redhead is R, and the dark-haired man is Boger. They are part of a rank group called Lion Fang, and are serving as Peipek's bodyguards. However, the region is quite peaceful, leaving them with little to do. Real notices that Takumi is holding his bag tightly and asks if he's carrying anything valuable. Takumi answers, explaining that his pet, murderous spider, is sleeping inside. The group is surprised that Takumi has tamed such a dangerous creature. Real insists on seeing the spider, but in a strangely unsettling manner. Maple responds by giving him a direct headbutt. Takumi immediately apologizes for Maple's actions, but the others assure him it's unnecessary since Real deserved it. In fact, Heath jokes that after meeting Real, Maple might end up fearing all humans. However, this doesn't seem to be the case, as she seems to have taken a liking to Boger. As everyone begins admiring Maple, the merchant calls Takumi to the front because he wants to talk about the potion he saw earlier. He asks if he has more available because if so, he'd love to buy some. Takumi doesn't mind selling potions to Peipek, but suddenly, their horse stops, and it seems there are problems ahead. A horde of goblins surrounds the carriage, ready to attack, which is bad news. The group seems excited to finally have the chance to take action. They tell Takumi and Peipek to relax and leave everything to them while they head into the field with about 20 goblins scattered around. They're confident in their abilities and rush into battle. Real eliminates the goblins from a distance with his bow, while Boger and Heath handle the rest up close with their mace and axe. It doesn't take long before they've wiped out all the goblins. Then they get to work dissecting the creatures to recover the magic stones. Shortly after, everyone returns to the cart, and their journey continues for 3 days until they reach Bolton. Upon entering the city, the members of Lion Fong head to the Adventurers Guild to report the success of their mission as bodyguards. Takumi accompanies them since he also needs to register at the guild to stay in the city. Takumi would have preferred to join the Alchemist's Guild, but since there isn't one in the area, he has no choice but to register as an adventurer. Hans, the receptionist, explains that the Adventurers Guild card can serve as identification. As long as he completes at least one simple mission per month, the card will remain active. Takumi proceeds to register as an adventurer and presents Maple as his pet. After completing all the paperwork, Takumi heads to Paypek's trading company to negotiate a deal for the potions. He has about 100 of 3 different types in his warehouse, and all are of extremely high quality. Paypek is willing to pay 10 silver coins for each healing and stamina potion, and 50 silver coins for each mana potion. Takumi does the quick math in his head and realizes he could make over 7 million gens in a single deal. Takumi feels that the amount of money mentioned is too much, but Paypek explains that he could have earned even more if he had an established reputation as a producer. With that in mind, and since Takumi plans to work as a producer in the city, Paypek suggests looking for a house with an additional workshop for convenience. However, this makes Takumi realize he hadn't even considered where he would live once he arrived in the city. Paypek decides to help him out a bit and has his assistant, Thomas, show Takumi a good property at an affordable price. However, when Takumi finally sees the house, it looks more like a mansion, and he doesn't think he can afford it. Thomas assures him that the mansion is quite affordable and guarantees that there are no ghosts there, so he has nothing to worry about. Takumi sees the connected workshop and begins to seriously consider buying it, as it would be ideal for his work. With the money he earned from selling potions to Paypek, he has enough to afford it. After thinking about it for a while, he decides to go ahead and tells Thomas that he'll buy the mansion. Thomas is pleased to hear this and says he'll start the paperwork right away so that Takumi can move in tomorrow if he wants. While walking through the city streets, Takumi notices an unpleasant smell in the air. Thomas notices that the smell bothers him and explains that it comes from the sewers. Wealthy people use magic purifiers to clean their waste, but the main sewers of the city lack this luxury. Magic purifiers are incredibly rare, only found in ancient ruins or dungeons, making them too expensive to install in the city's sewer system. Although priests are occasionally hired to manually purify the sewers with magic, they remain dirty most of the time. The next day, Takumi and Maple move into the new house, and the first thing Takumi wants to do is find a solution to the sewer problem. He gets a piece of quartz and clay from the Pap P company, and, after using magic to mold it, combines fire magic with space-time magic to bake it quickly. After a while, his mana completely runs out, so he has to drink a couple of mana potions. On the positive side, he manages to complete his creation, a modern toilet. At that moment, Takumi hears Paypek shouting from the living room. He rushes to see what's happening and finds Paypek completely wrapped in Maple's silk from head to toe. Confused, Takumi asks Maple why she would do something like this, and she explains that she thought Paypek would find it fun. To her credit, the soft and relaxing texture of her silk puts the merchant to sleep, but that doesn't make it acceptable. Takumi sincerely apologizes for Maple's behavior, and Paypek assures him it's okay, although he was suddenly tied up, which did startle him a bit. So, he excuses himself to quickly use Takumi's bathroom. However, as soon as he enters, he quickly comes out and starts asking what this technological wonder is. Our protagonist approaches and explains that it's a toilet connected to a magical purification device, so it cleans itself automatically once you're done. Basically, after using it, purification magic breaks down the waste into inorganic materials, which are then expelled through the drain. The system makes sense to Paypek, but he points out that the only way something like this could have been created is by someone with an aptitude for light magic. This makes Takumi realize he may have made a mistake, as Martha had explicitly warned him against using light magic. Worried, he asks Paypek to keep this a secret. Understanding Takumi's concerns, Paypek agrees not to say anything. However, he's so impressed that he insists on having some of these toilets and asks Takumi if he could make 100 of them. Our protagonist hesitates, as making just one toilet was a lot of work, but since Paypek insists so much, Takumi agrees to do it, as long as Paypek can provide the materials. The merchant is very happy to hear this, but can't expect Takumi to make all those toilets by himself. Therefore, he suggests that Takumi should make a slave contract. Takumi is shocked by the suggestion, as he would never consider having a slave. Paypek explains that if Takumi wants to keep his abilities a secret, having a slave to help him might be the safest option, since slaves are bound by contract to keep secrets. He emphasizes that possessing an aptitude for light magic is an extraordinary rarity, meaning divine favor, which would likely attract the attention of the Church of Divine Light. The Church could do everything in its power to force Takumi to work for them, making discretion even more critical. The Church gains a lot by monopolizing purification magic, so Paypek doubts they would be pleased to know that commoners could have access to cheap purification through Takumi's toilets. However, Paypek has an idea on how to avoid the Church, so Takumi doesn't need to worry about that for now. The most important thing is to make sure the Church doesn't discover his light magic. That's why Paypek insists that getting a slave would be the best option for him. Takumi remains firmly against slavery and declares that he'll handle everything himself. However, his guild card suddenly begins to glow, and when he checks it, he discovers a message requiring him to complete a verification mission to maintain his adventurer status. Realizing he won't have time to finish the toilets by himself, Takumi reluctantly agrees to buy a slave. Paypek takes him to the Mulan Trading Company, explaining that they are known as the most ethical slave traders in the area. While Paypek goes to negotiate with the owner for a good deal, Takumi wanders into the garden, attracted by its beauty. In the garden, he sees a stunning elven girl sitting on a terrace, and when she notices Takumi, she immediately tells him to leave. A little later, Paypek introduces Takumi to Mulan, the owner of the slave trading company, and informs her that Takumi is interested in buying a slave. Although she notes that Takumi seems a bit hesitant, Mulan asks Takumi if there's any particular reason for his reluctance. Our protagonist then explains that in his homeland, the practice of buying and selling people was abolished long ago, making it hard for him to accept this reality here. Mulan acknowledges Takumi's concerns but assures him that in this nation, the rights and privileges of slaves are maintained, at least to some extent. This is how it works. Essentially, the owner is responsible for providing the slave with essential needs like food, clothing, and a place to sleep, while the slave must perform certain tasks specified in their contract. The contract also includes a clause preventing the master or slave from causing lethal harm to the other. Takumi finds this arrangement reassuring, as it essentially turns the slave contract into something resembling a regular job with clearly defined rules. Mulan continues explaining the different types of slave contracts. For example, those who become slaves due to debt are under contract until they earn enough to pay off what they owe. Permanent contracts, on the other hand, are generally assigned to criminals or prisoners of war as an alternative to execution. However, most slave contracts come from people who have been illegally forced into slavery by bandits. Mulan suggests that a war slave would be the best option for Takumi since they cannot leave their master without permission. Although Mulan can arrange it, she asks why it's so important for the slave to be bound in this way. Paypek begins to explain Takumi's exceptional production abilities and the need to protect his secrets, but they're cool. He insists on listening directly to Takumi, clarifying that as a producer, he wants to focus on his work, but the missions from the Adventurers Guild complicate things. Living in a mansion, he also needs help with its maintenance. Furthermore, due to certain unique abilities he possesses, he requires guarantees that his slave will not reveal any information about him. Finally, since his missions involve collecting ingredients and can be dangerous, he requires a slave who is also a skilled fighter to ensure his safety. Mulan quickly understands that Takumi has bad intentions, but she firmly refuses to allow just one slave to handle both the household chores and the combat. She is willing to do business with him, but only if he buys 2 slaves separately for each role. With that in mind, she mentions she knows someone who would be perfect as a maid and calls Maria to the hall. Maria, who was forced into slavery as a child, has been extensively trained in reading, writing, mathematics, and general domestic duties, making her an excellent candidate for the job. Maria confidently claims she can handle all the household work of a mansion on her own, which reassures Takumi. However, Maria notices that he seems lost in thought and asks if something is troubling him. Takumi tells her he's a bit confused because he doesn't understand why no one has bought Maria, considering her to be pretty and capable. Maria blushes when she hears Takumi call her pretty, so he apologizes, saying it might have been inappropriate. Maria calms down and tells Takumi that she will only do the domestic work specified in the contract and nothing more. Takumi says he's fine with that, as he only wants her to do the household chores. But Maria insists on making it clear that she won't do anything else. Takumi doesn't understand why she keeps insisting on this, as Mulan already explained how the contracts work. But then Maria tells him she can't sleep with him. Takumi also feels uncomfortable but reassures Maria that his intentions are genuine, and he only wants her as a maid, nothing inappropriate. With that cleared up, Takumi asks Maria if she is still willing to form a contract with him, to which she happily agrees. With the matter resolved, Mulan announces that she will begin drafting the contract for Maria. However, when it comes to a combat slave, Mulan explains that she currently doesn't have anyone who meets the criteria. Upon hearing this, Maria intervenes, claiming that Sophia is still available. Mulan doesn't like being contradicted and tells Maria seriously to go back to her room and start packing her things. After Maria leaves, Takumi asks Mulan if what Maria said is true. Mulan confirms that Sophia is a combat slave in the building but warns that Sophia may not be a good option for him due to her multiple issues. Mulan tries to end the conversation, but Takumi, frustrated, insists on seeing Sophia. Reluctantly, Mulan agrees and takes him to her room. When they arrive, Sophia is surprised to see that the visitor is the boy she encountered in the courtyard earlier. Mulan explains Sophia's story, revealing that she was captured as a war slave during the conflict between the Traria Kingdom and the Uyghur Kingdom, events that took place more than 50 years ago. Takumi is shocked to learn that Sophia is over 50 years old, which leads Mulan to explain that the Uyghur Kingdom was a nation of elves, and elves naturally have much longer lifespans. Mulan goes on to explain why Sophia has had difficulty forming a contract with anyone. She has a visible scar on her ears, and both her right hand and left leg have limited mobility. These physical issues alone make her unsuitable for most people seeking a combat slave. But additionally, she has lost her ability to use elemental magic, an essential trait of elves, which suggests that she may be cursed. Mulan doubts that Sophia can be of help to Takumi in his missions. Despite his concerns, Takumi insists on evaluating the situation for himself and requests some time alone with Sophia. Reluctantly, Mulan agrees and leaves the room. Once alone, Takumi touches Sophia's face and looks into her eyes. Although he doesn't like using the evaluation ability on people without their permission, he feels it's necessary to understand what he's dealing with. When he examines Sophia's status screen, he's surprised to see that her stats are incredibly high. Although her injuries and curse limit her abilities, Takumi realizes that if he can solve those issues, she could be an ideal battle companion. Soon after, Mulan returns to the room and asks if Takumi has made a decision. He confidently states that he wants to take Sophia with him. Surprised, Sophia reminds him of all her flaws, but Takumi assures her that he will fix everything, so it won't be a problem. Impressed by his confidence, Mulan agrees and hands Sophia over to Takumi's care. A few minutes later, Mulan finalizes the terms of the contract, and the final step is to execute it. The three gather while Mulan uses magic to bind them to the agreed terms. Once the process is complete, Maria and Sophia officially become Takumi's slaves. Maria expresses her gratitude to Takumi for choosing her and promises to strive to meet his expectations, with Sophia repeating the sentiment. Finally, the trio returns to Takumi's mansion, and as soon as he opens the door, Maple jumps up excitedly to greet him. Concerned for Takumi's safety, both Maria and Sophia immediately tense up, with Sophia preparing to attack. However, Takumi quickly stops her. He explains to them that Maple is actually his pet killer spider. Although they are confused by the revelation, both decide to accept it and act as if it were completely normal. Shortly after, Takumi shows Sophia and Maria one of the empty rooms in the mansion. They both like it a lot, so Takumi tells them that Sophia can stay in that one and Maria can take the room next door. Neither of them can believe that Takumi is willing to give them their own rooms, but since he isn't using them anyway, he thinks it would be nice for someone to make use of them. There is also a large bath, so he tells them that once they finish unpacking, they can use the bathroom whenever they want. Maria is really excited about that. Later, while they're taking a bath together, Maria comments on how happy she is that Takumi decided to buy Sophia too. Sophia admits that she never thought Mulan would let Sophia go, since Mulan had spent the last 50 years refusing to sell her, no matter how much was offered. Takumi must have seen something worthwhile in her trust. The elf agrees that Takumi seems kind but remains a little cautious, as they know very little about him. During the contract preparations, Sophia saw Takumi's file and noticed that a lot of his information, such as his place of origin and lineage, was left blank. This makes her suspect that he might be hiding something on purpose. After finishing their bath, they go outside and are surprised to see that Takumi has already prepared dinner for them. Maria feels especially devastated, as housework is supposed to be her task. So if Takumi does everything by himself, she feels as useless as a toilet. Takumi explains that he was just trying to make Maria's first workday a little easier, but if it makes her feel better, he'll let her take care of the rest of the tasks on her own. For now, he asks them to sit down so they can eat together. But Sophia hesitates, as slaves generally don't eat at the same table as their master. Takumi lies and says that his behavior might seem strange for a slave owner, but he doesn't want them to get caught up in traditions. Speaking of traditions, Takumi mentions that he doesn't like being called master all the time and suggests they call him by his name instead. However, Sophia asks if this is a formal order. Takumi clarifies that he doesn't want to force them to call him by his name if that makes them uncomfortable, while Maria has no problem with it. Sophia, however, remains a little undecided. The next day, Takumi goes to Paypex Trading Company to pick up a package he had ordered. Paypex says he did his best to wrap it safely, but still asks Takumi to be careful when taking it home. On the way, our protagonist notices a nearby church, so he enters and kneels to pray to the goddess Nolan. He thanks her for all the skills she's granted him, as they have been very helpful. However, there's something he wants to ask her. During his time in this world, he learned that the Holy Empire of Sidonia controls the religious doctrine here, and he doesn't understand why Nolan has so many issues with them. At that moment, Takumi hears Nolan's voice and notices her in front of him, which causes him to panic momentarily. Nolan calmly explains that she heard his prayers and brought him here for a little chat. In response to his question, she reveals that she doesn't favor Sidonia because they do not follow her will. She explains that this world has two main religions, the Church of Creation, which has faithfully venerated her since its inception, and the Church of Divine Light, which operates without regard for her guidance, doing whatever they please. The Sidonian Empire even launched multiple expeditions to spread their religion by force. Throughout all this, Nolan chose not to intervene, as she had no interest in imposing herself in human disputes. Takumi points out that this was a foolish decision, as the only reason Sidonia was able to activate the summoning spell that brought him here was because Nolan didn't intervene. It does sound bad when put that way, but she gave him all her blessings to make up for her mistake. However, there's something she needs to tell him. Most of her blessings will remain with him forever, but one of them will disappear, and that is the great luck he's been having lately. She basically gave him a beginner's tutorial, allowing him to meet such nice and helpful people, but soon he'll encounter people with malicious intentions. From now on, the results of his actions will depend entirely on him. Shortly after, Takumi arrives home only to stumble upon Apple, who greets him enthusiastically. Sophia and Maria rush to check if he's okay, but when the elf tries to take the package he brought, he quickly puts it in his item box to prevent her from touching it. He then informs them that he will be working in his workshop for a while, and she asks them not to bother her. Sophia, noting that the package was wrapped in high-quality magical paper, suspecting it might contain something dangerous. Unable to ignore her doubts, she follows Takumi to his workshop. There, she is surprised to see him dip a knife in poison, cut himself, and heal the wound immediately. His actions seem strange and unsettling. When Takumi casually mentions the name Maria during his experiment, Sophia's suspicions grow, leading her to believe he has sinister intentions toward Maria. She tries to attack him, but exhausted, she collapses. Takumi checks her condition to understand what is happening and discovers she is suffering from extreme exhaustion, probably due to her curse. A wound like that would normally not heal so easily, but because of the curse, it takes a lot of effort to heal. Once his light magic levels up, he has enough power to lift the curse, so he uses all his magic on it and eventually manages to fully heal Sophia and lift her curse. She remains unconscious due to exhaustion but should be fine after some rest. A couple of hours later, Sophia wakes up and urgently warns Maria to flee, convinced that Takumi is completely crazy based on what she saw earlier. However, Maria has no idea what Sophia is referring to but is more certain than ever that Takumi is genuinely a good person. To prove her point, Maria shows Sophia a mirror, revealing the changes Takumi made. Sophia is stunned to realize that her body has been healed and her magic restored. Determined to understand, the elf goes out to confront Takumi, who confirms he managed to lift her curse. He explains that it required significant pain and effort to level up his skill, but reassures her that she doesn't need to feel indebted because he had promised to heal her. Sophia realizes she completely misjudged her master. Overwhelmed with gratitude for the kindness he has shown her, she kneels before him and solemnly swears to faithfully serve him for the rest of her life. The next morning, Takumi heads to the library to search for information about alchemy, only to discover that the entire library contains barely 4 books on the subject. Puzzled, our protagonist wonders why alchemy is not practiced more, especially since it seems like something simple to understand. However, the truth is that alchemy is far from simple. The available texts are written in the ancient language of that world, and the only reason Takumi can understand anything is because of the blessing Nolan gave him, allowing him to understand all the languages of that world. Later that day, Takumi, Maria, and Sophia finish making a large batch of toilets. Although there are still many more to make, they have been making steady progress. Takumi calculates that they will be able to take a break from toilet making for a while, as he won't be working on more toilets for the time being. Maria asks him what he plans to do next. Takumi explains that he plans to go on some trips in the near future. Specifically, he wants to search for new ingredients for alchemy, enjoy the unique landscapes of the world, and even explore some ruins along the way. He has already decided to take Sophia as his bodyguard, so he'll need Maria to stay behind and take care of the house while he's away. However, Maria isn't thrilled with the idea and asks Takumi to let her accompany him on the trip, but he doesn't think it's a good idea since the journey is likely to be dangerous. Also, he mainly hired her to care for the mansion, so taking her with him would go against the purpose of having a servant. While Maria understands his reasoning, the thought of being alone in the mansion makes her feel incredibly lonely, so she begs Takumi to reconsider. Our protagonist feels guilty for leaving Maria alone, but, before making a decision, decides to check something. He takes Maria's face in his hands and uses evaluation to examine her stats. To his surprise, Maria turns out to be quite impressive. Her skills are excellent, not overly powerful but definitely strong enough to defend herself in a fight. With that, Takumi agrees to let her accompany him, as long as she is sure she can handle the trip. Sophia offers to train Maria in magic and combat to ensure she is prepared for any potential danger, and Takumi likes the idea. He then asks Sophia to train both him and Maria. Now that it's decided that Maria will join the expedition, our protagonist decides it's time to start crafting equipment for everyone. Before getting to work, he asks Sophia what type of weapon she would prefer. Without hesitation, Sophia begins listing an extensive arsenal of weapons. She requests a long sword, a 2.5-meter spear, a bow, and 2 daggers. Her level of preparation surprises us, given her experience as a skilled warrior. On the other hand, Maria is not very familiar with weapons. Although she received some basic training with a short sword, she tells Takumi that a couple of combat knives should be enough for her. However, Sophia points out that relying solely on combat knives would put Maria at a disadvantage in terms of range, so she suggests adding a spear to her arsenal. Since Maria doesn't know how to use a spear, Sophia offers to give her a quick training session to teach her the basics. While they work on that, Takumi sets about crafting the weapons. It doesn't take him long to finish making all the blades, but the process consumes a significant amount of his mana, forcing him to drink a mana potion to recover before continuing. The final step for the blades is for Takumi to enchant them with attack spells and self-repair, so that it doesn't require maintenance as often. Once he finishes with that, the blades are finally complete. Now he moves on to working on the handles, but since Maria requested combat knives, he will also need a sheath for them. Although Takumi is a gentleman, he still comes from a warrior culture, so imagining Maria's thick thighs with knives strapped to them almost makes him faint. The next thing Takumi needs to craft is armor for the girls. Instead of asking them directly to let him take their measurements, he comes up with a more convenient solution. He opens a box of items and pulls out 2 life-size dolls of Maria and Sophia that he had previously made using his appraisal skill. It's better not to ask why he made them in the first place. As for the armor, Takumi plans to make it using silk from maple and part of the shell, and leather he obtained from the armored boar. When it comes to design, he's never had the opportunity to make armor for others, so he decides to let his imagination run wild and try out all sorts of costume fantasies with the dolls. After several days and multiple redesigns, he finally presents the armor to Maria and Sophia, and they look fantastic on them. He asks if they like it, and both are genuinely surprised at how well it fits, especially since Takumi never took their measurements. It's almost as if he had exact replicas of them. Suddenly, Maple starts to reveal the existence of the dolls Takumi used, but he quickly covers her mouth before she can say anything else. To divert attention and avoid suspicions, Takumi changes the subject by asking them what they think of the weapons he made for them. Sophia draws the sword he crafted for her and says it feels perfect. The same goes for Maria, who tries the combat knives and is grateful for the gear Takumi made for her. There's one more thing Takumi made for them, rings that should assist them with their magic. Sophia and Maria accept the rings, though they feel bad for bothering Takumi, as rings like those surely consume a lot of mana. Takumi admits that it was expensive, but it helped him improve his ice and lightning magic, so it was worth it. Once all the gear is tested, the three head to the guild so Takumi can register Maria and Sophia as adventurers. Since it's their first time at the guild, Maria and Sophia are assigned rank H. While there, the receptionist reminds Takumi that he needs to complete at least one mission to maintain his adventurer status. Takumi heads to the mission board to look for an appropriate mission. His goal is to choose a rank H mission to keep things simple, but Sophia suggests picking a more difficult one, as it would help him rank up faster. A couple of idiots overhear that Takumi is rank H and think they can intimidate him into backing down to have some fun with Sophia and Maria. They tell Takumi that they're rank D and there's no way he can take on all of them at once. They have no problem beating up a random guy just for fun. Maria is about to step in and make those idiots come to their senses, but Takumi stops her and says he'll handle it. He's absolutely terrified, but these guys not only disrespected him but, more importantly, disrespected his friends, so he can't back down. The rank D adventurers are insulted that a rank H rookie like Takumi dares to challenge them, so the big guy throws a punch with all his strength. Takumi doesn't even bother to dodge and lets the punch hit him. But the only thing that gets hurt is the guy who ends up breaking his hand from the impact. Suddenly, the guild master, Barak, arrives at the scene, demanding to know what happened, as fighting inside the guild is strictly prohibited. He initially assumes that Takumi is at fault because he's completely unscathed, while the other guy has a broken arm. However, Maria quickly intervenes to defend Takumi, insisting that he didn't do anything wrong. The receptionist also backs her up, explaining that all Takumi did was stand still and take a punch to the face. The guild master wants to get to the bottom of it, so he orders someone to take the big guy away and tells Takumi and his group to come with him as he has some questions. He believes Takumi was just defending himself but doesn't understand how he did it and would like an explanation. Takumi feels a bit uncomfortable revealing his skills, but the guild master assures him that everything will be confidential. In that case, Takumi explains that when the man threw the punch, he opened his item box and took out some charcoal, which he used to cover his body as a defense to ensure he didn't get hurt. He synthesized the charcoal into diamond, which explains how he broke the guy's fist without doing anything else. Taking advantage of the situation, the guild master suggests promoting Takumi to rank D immediately, as it's clear he has the skills to qualify for a higher rank, which would keep the idiots from trying to attack him just because he's accompanied by attractive women. However, Takumi declines, saying it wouldn't be right to get an automatic promotion for that reason. Hans then proposes that Takumi and his group take on some challenging missions to earn a promotion fairly. Both Sophia and Maria think it's a good idea, so he accepts the assigned mission, which is to exterminate goblins and trolls and collect herbs. Maria heads to the forest to start. Maple acts as the group scout and warns them that there's a group of 4 goblins ahead. Sophia takes the initiative and offers to take care of the first 2. She rushes forward and cuts them down in one strike. The remaining 2 are caught in Maple's web, and when they fall to the ground, Maria and Takumi stab them in the neck. Takumi is satisfied with how well they handled the monsters, but he can't help but notice the number of goblins they've encountered in this area. They've already defeated almost 100 goblins and trolls, which leads Sophia to suspect that there might be a nearby monster camp. If that's the case, it's highly likely that there's a goblin general present. A goblin general is a rank C monster, which usually requires at least 5 rank D parties to defeat, but with Sophia's spiritual magic, Maria's earth magic, and Takumi's elemental magic, Sophia is confident that they can beat it. Takumi still feels a little nervous about accepting such a challenge, but since Maria and Sophia seem so confident in their strength, he's willing to give it a try, not to mention he still has Maple on his side. Suddenly, Maple informs Takumi that she is about to evolve, and since he can no longer participate in the fight, Takumi agrees and opens a pocket dimension for Mappu to rest. However, this leaves Sophia and Maria full of questions, wondering how Takumi learned to create pocket dimensions. Our protagonist casually dismisses their curiosity, saying it's just one of his more important abilities. He points out that without Mappu, they won't have as much support as they initially planned. Despite this, Sophia remains confident that they can still move forward. They soon arrive at the goblin camp, and after some reconnaissance, the elf concludes that there are about 400 goblins there. Takumi asks if they really need to fight all of them, and normally they would, but Sophia's reconnaissance also revealed that there are no humans in the area, so they are free to destroy the place with magic. The three of them prepare their strongest spells and simultaneously unleash hell on the goblin camp. By the time they finish, almost all the goblins have been wiped out, leaving only the goblin general and some goblin knights. Sophia decides to face the goblin knights, leaving Takumi in charge of the general. Instead of facing him directly with his spear, Takumi decides to set him on fire, finishing him off quickly. Once they confirm that all the goblins are eliminated, they collect the magic stones and return to the guild, completely exhausted from the effort. The three of them can barely stand. Hans is amazed that they managed to complete their mission and even defeat a goblin general in just half a day. He then asks them to go to the meeting room because the guild master wants to speak with them. Barak is both impressed and upset that Takumi did something as reckless as facing an entire goblin camp with just one group. But just when he's about to start scolding Takumi, his pocket dimension opens and Mappu emerges. Now she has evolved into an arachnid, and everyone is excited to see her new form. At that moment, Barak decides to overlook the whole reckless battle issue since clearly, Takumi's group is not normal. When they return home, Maria asks our protagonist if he has any leftover fabric to make underwear for her and Sophia. However, Takumi has a much better design idea and offers to make them himself. Just then, Mappu emerges from the pocket dimension and informs Takumi that Papek has come to see him. Our protagonist goes to meet him and learns that Marcos Godwin, the Lord of Bolton, has requested an audience with him. Although Takumi would prefer to avoid meeting with Marcos, the circumstances leave him with no choice. Takumi eventually arrives at Godwin's castle, and fortunately, Godwin turns out to be a reasonable man. The first thing he does is express his gratitude to Takumi for creating all those toilets, which have significantly improved the town's hygiene. He also acknowledges Takumi's efforts in eliminating the goblin camp, which would have posed a serious threat had it not been removed. Recognizing Takumi as a valuable resource for the nation, Godwin warns him to be careful as it's only a matter of time before Sidonia sets her sights on him. A few days later, our protagonist finally finishes making Sophia and Maria's underwear, but the process turned out to be much more challenging than he expected, leaving him completely exhausted. Sophia and Maria are delighted with the results and praise his design, expressing their gratitude. Without realizing it, Takumi asks them to try on the underwear to check how it fits. A moment later, he realizes how inappropriate that sounded and runs off, embarrassed. Sophia and Maria, however, are a bit disappointed, as they were more than willing to try it on if he had stayed. A few days later, Takumi needed to refresh himself, so he decided that his next project would be refrigerators. Once he finished them, he explained to the girls that these fridges would help keep food cold and prevent it from spoiling. They were excited to feel the cold air coming from the device. To make the refrigerators, Takumi combined iron, chrome, and nickel to produce stainless steel, then incorporated a magical device infused with cooling magic. Maria expressed her gratitude to Takumi, as now she could prepare meals with fresh ingredients whenever she wanted. Our protagonist planned to give one of the refrigerators to Maria, while the other two would be sent to Papek to sell. With that task completed, Takumi was ready to move on to his next project. Sophia asks him if he was planning to create something new again, but in reality, Takumi was considering improving his equipment instead. There were some adjustments he had wanted to make since his battle with the goblins, and with the upcoming trip, he wanted his equipment to be in the best possible condition. With that in mind, he decided to craft a set using mithril and adamantite. Takumi went to the guild to ask Hans if there was a blacksmith in the area experienced in working with mithril and adamantite. However, since these metals were extremely rare, there weren't many artisans with the necessary skills. If Hans had to guess, the only ones capable of handling them would be the dwarves of Namstal, but since that was far away, traveling there was not an option for Takumi. Our protagonist dismissed the idea that he couldn't find an appropriate blacksmith after all. However, just before he left, Hans mentioned a town called Horaz, located to the northeast of the kingdom of Barcola. If Takumi traveled there, he should be able to find some mithril and adamantite. The only problem was that access could be difficult, as only guild members of blacksmiths were allowed into the mines. Fortunately, Hans had a clever way to bypass the rules. Speaking hypothetically, if Takumi accepted a mission to eliminate the monsters that had appeared in the mine and, by pure coincidence, came across some mithril during the process, well, nothing would stop him from extracting the metals for himself. At that moment, the guild master appeared suddenly and mentioned that he had the perfect mission for him. He explained that the guild had been running low on trend wood lately, and with winter approaching, they needed someone to gather more. The trends often roamed near the Hora's mines, so Takumi was already looking for an excuse to go there. The guild master thought he wouldn't mind gathering some wood along the way. Plus, since Takumi was already planning to head there, the guild master wanted him and his group to escort someone as well. However, this was starting to feel like a lot of work, as our protagonist had never accepted an escort mission before, so he asked why the Leon Fong members couldn't handle it instead. The guild master explained that Leon Fong was currently on another mission and couldn't do it, and Takumi was the only one he could ask for the favor. Our protagonist finally accepted the escort mission but still didn't know much about the Hora's route, so he asked Hans how long it would take to get there. Hans explained that the trip would take 7 days in a horse-drawn carriage, but if Takumi used a monster horse instead, he could reduce the travel time to just 4 days, as they were twice as fast as regular horses. Thinking it was a great idea, Takumi asked if he could take one, but unfortunately, Real arrived just in time to inform him that all the monster horses were already being used by Leon Fong. Hans was surprised to see Real arrive so soon, but Real explained that he and his group hadn't finished their mission yet. They had just defeated a black buffalo on the way and returned to leave it before its meat spoiled. Since they needed to leave again in the morning to meet up with the rest of Leon Fong, Real planned to stay in the city for the night. Seeing this, Takumi offered for him to stay at his house and take a bath. Real was excited about the idea of a bath and decided to accept Takumi's offer. Our protagonist was happy to hear this, but he actually needed to go to another place afterward, so he told Real he could wait at his house. However, Real said he would prefer to accompany him instead. In that case, Takumi allowed him to accompany him to Paypek's company, and while there, he managed to persuade Paypek to lend him a couple of monster horses for his mission. However, in exchange, Paypek asked Takumi to sell him some of the rare minerals he managed to find in the Hora's mine. Additionally, regarding the fridge he had brought earlier, Paypek really liked it, so he asked Takumi to make more when he returned from his mining trip. Meanwhile, during Takumi's mission, Sophia began to seriously worry that something might have happened to him since he still hadn't returned. Later that night, our protagonist returned home along with Real, and he blamed himself for dragging him into such a long task, even though he must have been tired from his trip. But Ariel didn't mind, since he was the one who insisted on accompanying Takumi. In that moment, he felt a hostile gaze directed at him, and Takumi immediately realized that he had no chance against that person with his current team. So without hesitation, he grabbed Takumi's hand and ran. However, their pursuer closed the gap quickly and landed a powerful kick to Ariel's face. The attacker turned out to be Sophia, who was completely convinced that Ariel had tried to kidnap Takumi, so without a second thought, she was ready to finish him off. Just before she could attack Ariel, Takumi quickly stepped in front of him and told Sophia that she had misunderstood everything. After explaining the situation, Sophia knelt down and sincerely apologized to Ariel for almost killing him due to a misunderstanding. Fortunately, Ariel wasn't harmed, and he decided to forgive her, although now he had many questions he wanted to ask Takumi. This list of questions only grew when they finally arrived at Takumi's house, where Ariel was greeted with the sight of even more beautiful girls. He asked Takumi what was going on, and Takumi explained that he needed a servant to take care of the house and someone to protect him, which is why he hired Sophia and Maria. Then there was Maple, who at some point had evolved. Ariel got excited seeing Maple again in her new form, and although Maple remembered him, she still didn't like him. Ariel despaired as he realized that both Boger and he were already married, and even Takumi had 2 girlfriends while he was still single. However, Takumi quickly corrected him, clarifying that he wasn't dating Sophia or Maria. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Ariel decided to try his luck and ask Sophia if she had ever considered dating him, but she immediately rejected him, and Maria did the same. So Ariel was defeated once again. A little later, while Ariel was crying in the bathroom, Takumi spoke to both Sophia and Maria about the mission he had accepted to extract mithril and adamantite. Sophia thought it was a good idea since Trent wood was a valuable material, and since everyone agreed, Takumi said they would depart in 3 days. The next morning, Ariel left to meet the rest of Lon Fag. Once he was gone, Takumi decided it was time to start making new gear for the group's upcoming wood hunting. He obtained a tungsten carbide magic draining sword, which was already an impressive weapon but too large to use in its current state. Because of this, Takumi planned to dismantle it. He tried using his alchemy skill on it, but the sword resisted, requiring much more effort than usual. However, after insisting, Takumi finally managed to break down the metal and forge it into 2 separate blades. The blades drained mana from anyone they cut, so Takumi was satisfied with the results, though the process left him completely exhausted. 3 days later, Takumi and his group met with Paypek to collect the carriage he had promised, and inside, they found the man the guild master had assigned them to escort, who was already waiting for them. The man introduced himself as Gambo. With that, the group set off on their journey, but along the way, they made a stop at a nearby field so that Takumi and the others could hunt Trent trees. While exploring the forest, Sophia noticed that a Trent was trying to blend in with the trees and quickly pointed it out to Takumi. Without hesitation, he charged forward to take it down. The Trent tree tried to counterattack, but with Sophia and Maria covering him, Takumi was able to defeat it easily. However, that was just one Trent. There were an entire forest full of them. Fighting each one individually would take too much time, so Sophia suggested they use magic, and it seemed to be working quite well. However, they were soon confronted by an ancient tree, and no matter how much magic they used to attack it, it kept regenerating. The only way to defeat it was by cutting its main body in one blow. So, Takumi had Sophia cover his sword with fire while he attacked, with her and Maria providing backup. Working together, they finally managed to defeat the leader of the Trent trees. With that, their Trent hunting was complete, and they could continue their journey. When they arrived in Hours, the group headed to the local adventurers guild. Once there, Gambo pointed out a mission asking adventurers to exterminate iron moles in the mines. These creatures fed on minerals, making them a significant threat. By accepting the mission, they would get permission to enter the mines. Soon after, the group was inside the mines, extracting minerals, and they were lucky enough to find some mithril and adamantite. However, the minerals attracted some mole monsters from underground, so they had to prepare for a fight. Just before the mole emerged, Takumi took a moment to think and quickly devised a clever plan. The moment the iron mole surfaced, he cast a flash of light magic at it, and instantly, the creature collapsed, becoming an easy target to finish off. Although Takumi's method was undeniably effective, Sophia and Maria couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, as it meant they wouldn't get the chance to fight. Since the mining expedition was a success, everyone returned to Bolton a few days later. Once there, Takumi visited Gambo's shop to learn how to work with the mithril, and Adamantina Camo explained the processes of extracting metal from ore, and after much effort, our protagonist managed to create refined mithril and adamantine. He began using them to craft all sorts of equipment imbued with magic. When Takumi finished making the new equipment, he handed it to Maria and Sophia for them to try. The girls were amazed at how much more resistant their armor had become, and to their surprise, it even had magic embedded. Takumi explained that he had imbued their equipment with magic that complemented their respective elemental affinities. As for his own armor, he had enchanted it with something called Thunder, a skill that greatly enhanced agility, allowing him to move at incredible speeds. However, when Takumi tried to do something impressive to demonstrate how fast he was, he ended up crashing face first into a wall. Next, Takumi presented the new weapons he had crafted, along with the enchantments he had added. Both Sophia and Maria were thrilled with their new spears, but Sophia had a special request. She was willing to give her life to protect Takumi, so she asked if he could forge a shield that would allow her to defend him more effectively. Takumi thought it was a good idea but reminded Sophia that she should value her own life just as much as she valued his. The goddess Olin had been watching Takumi all along, pleased with the progress he was making. She knew he would need every ounce of strength he could gather for the battles ahead. Meanwhile, 1 year later, in the kingdom where the other heroes had been summoned, Akira and Yamato were ready, having completed their training. They were about to embark on a mission assigned by the King of Samander. Back in Takumi's time, he had just finished the shields that Sophia had requested. However, seeing how much effort and energy it had cost her, she couldn't help but feel guilty. She wished Takumi had an assistant who could help with his production to ease his workload. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, the Lord received a letter from Sidonia. Apparently, news about Takumi's toilets and the purification magic they possessed had spread. Though they still didn't know who Takumi was, they were already preparing plans to act against him. The Church of Divine Light, upon learning that purification magic toilets were being used in Barca, sent a messenger to meet with the king. They quickly presented an official appeal to the Pope in Sidonia. As a result, they managed to convince the Pope to declare that purification magic was a divine gift bestowed by their god, meaning they should have the right to use it. Consequently, they demanded that the king of Barca hand over the patent for the purification magic circle and insisted that he reveal the identity of the person responsible for creating these purification devices. At first, the king listened to the church's demands, but since they were completely absurd, he decided to ignore them. The church's messenger was stunned by the audacity of the king in challenging the church, and in response, threatened to order all priests stationed in Barca to return immediately to Sidonia. However, the king remained calm in the face of the threat and even encouraged them to follow through on their warning. Later, Takumi eventually learned of the king's decision and felt relieved that he hadn't been betrayed. However, he couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy about how firm the king had been in rejecting the Church of Divine Light, with the Sidonia Church likely turning against Barca. Takumi wondered if this could lead to such a large conflict, but Peck reassured him, assuring him there was nothing to worry about. After all, the Church of Divine Light wasn't the only religious group in the world. There was also the Church of Creation. While the Church of Divine Light had a lot of influence in the country, there were many followers of the Church of Creation, so its absence wouldn't be a major loss. Additionally, the priests of the Church of Creation offered healing magic to anyone who needed it, whereas the Church of Divine Light charged exorbitant fees for any sacred magic. Since the Church of Divine Light was backed by Sidonia, Takumi would likely have to stay away from them from now on, but that's just how things worked. Anyway, the reason Peck came to see Takumi today was because he had previously shown the king the golden eel and Takumi's refrigerator, which impressed the king so much that he asked Peck to bring Takumi for a meeting. Our protagonist felt a bit nervous about meeting someone as important as the king, but Peck reassured him that it wasn't an order. He was free to decline the invitation if he wished. In fact, Peck really hoped he would accept, as it would greatly benefit his company's relationship with the royal capital. Takumi finally agreed to the meeting, and that same night, he shared the news with Sophia and Maria, asking if they would be willing to accompany him to the royal capital. Both eagerly expressed their desire to go with him, so he suggested they leave in a week. However, there was much to prepare before the trip, including the capital project, which would take about 6 days. Maria would need to prepare a lot of food in advance. While Maria took care of that, Takumi mentioned he would work on new cloaks for both her and Sophia. He had recently received some dark element magic stones from Peck, and by using them to craft cloaks, he would be able to enchant them with a perception blocking spell. Though this spell would be incredibly useful in combat, Takumi's main reason for doing it was to ensure that Sophia and Maria wouldn't be disturbed when they arrived at the royal capital. Later, Sophia and Maria went shopping, and while they picked out some fruit, Maria complained that Takumi didn't have enough confidence in himself. Sophia agreed, pointing out that he was attractive and had extraordinary alchemical skills, and she has an incredible talent for invention. She continues excitedly listing all the great qualities of our boy. But Maria can't help but notice how excited Sophia gets when talking about him. This leads her to suspect that Sophia might actually be in love with him. Sophia quickly denies having impure thoughts and says that she only loves Takumi as her teacher, but Maria knows a love story is unfolding. Meanwhile, back at the village church, Takumi kneels before the statue of Nolan to offer a prayer. It doesn't take long before a radiant light surrounds him, and suddenly he finds himself in the domain where she warmly greets him. It's been a while since she last saw him, and she learned of his invitation to the royal capital. So, if he's here to pray for a safe journey, she says that he really should have brought her an offering. Takumi explains that he's actually there because he has some questions. The Church of the Divine Light worships a goddess named Anat, so his first question is whether there's really another goddess besides Nolan. Nolan firmly states that she is the only true goddess in this world. But if that's the case, he asks, then what is Anat? Nolan doesn't want to reveal too much, so she simply says that he'll find out when the time comes. Since he's there, Takumi also takes the opportunity to ask Nolan if she knows what happened to the other heroes who were summoned with him. It's been 10 months since he arrived in this world, and under normal circumstances, such an important event as the summoning of heroes from another world would have caused a great stir. However, curiously, Takumi hasn't heard anyone mention it. Nolan decides to be honest and admits that when she summoned him, she manipulated time a little by sending him a year into the past. In other words, the heroes haven't technically even been summoned yet. It will still take a few months for that to happen. However, Takumi is confused as to why she went through the trouble of sending him back in time, so he asks her to explain. Unfortunately, the goddess says that her time is up, so she won't answer any more questions for now. She also asks him to bring sweets as an offering the next time he visits her. Takumi tries to say that he has more questions, but she gives him a knock on the head, sending him back to the mortal world. Our boy finally wakes up on the floor of the church, feeling like Nolan was avoiding his questions about the other heroes. However, since he has no plans to get involved with them anyway, he doesn't think much of it. He then returns home to finish the new cloaks he had been making for the girls. Once they're ready, he hands them over to Maria and Sophia, who adore the designs. Hearing their praise makes Takumi feel happy, but there's still something else he wants to work on before his journey. He takes both of them to his workshop and reveals his next project, his own carriage. With all the traveling they've been doing lately, he considers it would be much more convenient to have a comfortable cart they can use whenever they need to instead of constantly borrowing one. However, even though he can build the cart by himself, he still doesn't have a horse to pull it. So he's thinking of renting one from the guild. But Maria quickly tells him that's not necessary. They can get one themselves. The Death Forest, located on the outskirts of Walton, is full of monsters, and if they search enough, they might find a unicorn or a drake horse, both much faster than an ordinary monster horse. Maria is especially excited about the idea of going to catch one, but Takumi can't help but feel a little uneasy. They finally set off in search of a horse, and as they make their way through the forest, Takumi turns to Sophia and asks if drake horses are really that fast compared to the monster horses they usually rent from the guild. She confirms that yes, and explains that a drake horse possesses speed, endurance, and durability far superior to that of a regular monster horse. Drake horses have a similar appearance to normal horses, but with a huge horn like a rhinoceros and dragon scales along their bodies, making them easy to recognize if they find one. At that moment, Maple calls out to them, urging them to hurry so they can find a horse once and for all. Maple is clearly full of energy, but that's mostly because she's excited to get a new companion when Takumi forms a familiar contract with a horse. However, before the others can catch up with her, Sophia suddenly senses the presence of a nearby monster and instinctively draws her sword. An instant later, a new bush jumps out from between the thickets, but instead of attacking, it just runs past them. Takumi confidently points out that the wolf didn't notice them, thanks to their cloaks' enhanced perception. While Sophia is impressed with how effective the cloaks are, she suggests that it might be a good idea to take them off so they can face some monster. As soon as she removes the cloak, Sophia manages to take down a wild boar with a single blow. Maria thinks this is perfect since she can prepare wild boar meat for their journey. Meanwhile, Maple is getting impatient and tells them to hurry, but at that moment, Takumi grabs a dead tree from the ground and, since he needs wood to build his carriage, decides to take advantage of the opportunity and start chopping it down alongside Sophia while Maria handles the meat. As Takumi and Sophia focus on the tree, Maple becomes more impatient waiting and decides to venture off alone in search of a horse. As she moves deeper into the forest, she notices an unusual number of dead trees scattered around, making her wonder what could have caused such destruction. Eventually, she comes across a drake horse lying on the ground, and at first glance, it seems to be in very bad condition. Cautiously, Maple approaches the horse, and she asks if it's injured, to which Drac Carell responds by shooting a ray at her, forcing her to step back. However, she quickly realizes that it's just acting out of fear because of its injuries. She understands that feeling perfectly, as it was exactly how she felt before Takumi found her. Trying to reassure the creature, she gently tells it that there's no need to worry. Her master is a really kind person, and when he arrives, he'll heal its wounds. They just have to wait a little longer. But it seems they won't be able to wait in peace, as suddenly two termite monsters appear, and they don't seem friendly. Mapo realizes the termites are responsible for the horse's injuries, so she uses her webs to trap them and throws their bodies in front of the horse to electrocute them. However, there are many more termites in the area, and they could be in serious trouble. To protect herself and Drac Carell, Maple quickly weaves a silk barrier. Although she manages to buy some time, she knows the termites will eventually break through. Desperate, she tries to call Takumi, trying to establish a connection with him, but she gets no response. Growing more anxious, she starts to fear that Takumi got so caught up with the wood he found that he completely forgot about her. As desperation takes over Maple and the termites finally break through the barrier, she closes her eyes and prepares for death. However, when she opens them again, she finds Takumi standing in front of her, and the relief she feels is indescribable. Maple throws herself into his arms, completely grateful that he came to save her. She was very worried when he didn't respond to her call. Takumi explains that the reason her call didn't get through was probably due to the barrier she created. Although it was well built to block attacks, the layers of silk were woven so densely that they also blocked all mana signals, preventing her message from reaching him. However, as soon as he realized he had lost the connection with Maple, he immediately ran to her last known location. Upon arriving, he quickly notices the horse behind Maple, and she doesn't waste time asking him to help. With his protection, he tries to use healing magic on it, but the horse rejects it, as it doesn't trust Takumi. Sophia warns him that they should leave soon, as more termites could appear. But if they leave the horse there, it will surely die. So Takumi decides to place it in his pocket dimension along with Maple until they can take it home. Sophia warns him that he can't place such a high-level beast in his pocket dimension without forming a contract first, as that would put a lot of pressure on his body. However, Takumi is sure he'll be fine. Turns out he wasn't. The moment he put the Draco horse in his pocket dimension, he collapsed almost immediately. Even after the girls brought him back home, he remained unconscious for the next 12 hours. The fact that the Drac-Corel is still in his pocket dimension means that Takumi's mana will keep draining until it's completely gone. And since he's unconscious, he can't open the barrier to release it. So Sophia contacts Maple and asks her to open the pocket dimension from the inside. Maple agrees to help but points out that the horse will probably get scared when suddenly finding itself in an unfamiliar place. To keep it calm, she decides to set up a tent in the front yard so it can adjust to its new environment. Once the horse is freed from the pocket dimension, Takumi should start recovering. Meanwhile, Maria goes out to buy medical supplies to treat him and asks Sophia to stay by his side so that he has someone with him when he wakes up later that night. Takumi finally wakes up from his coma and comes out to see the horse. Maple had been telling the horse all about Takumi while they waited for him to recover. After introducing himself, Takumi asks if the horse would be willing to form a contract with him. The Drac-Corel trusts Maple, and since she's giving her vote of confidence to Takumi, it agrees to form a contract with him. Now that the horse has been tamed, Takumi can finally use magic on it without worrying about any negative reactions. Without hesitation, he casts advanced healing to heal all of its injuries in an instant. The Drac-Corel regains its strength, standing up once again, fully restored. Now that the horse is officially one of Takumi's familiars, he needs to give it a name. Since he named Maple after a leaf, he decides to follow the same theme and names it Camellia, after the tree that keeps its leaves all year round. Maple is happy that Camellia has fully recovered, and with everything finally resolved, Maria calls everyone for dinner. She has prepared a feast, and since Takumi hasn't eaten all day due to his unconscious state, he definitely needs a good meal. Meanwhile, at the Palm Slave Company in Bailat, the royal capital of Barcola, we see a beast woman with an aptitude for magic named Reva. However, since she still has much to learn before being able to use magic, a potential buyer rejects her, as he wants someone useful immediately. On top of that, this scoundrel says he has no intention of taking care of her until she can do something. Palm reassures the little girl, telling her that one day a good master will appear. Still, when she is in her room, she remains depressed, remembering the reason she left her village. It turns out she sold herself into slavery so that her family could have money, asking only her little brother to take care of their mother and promising to send them a lot of money as soon as she could. However, despite her promise, no one has bought her yet. Meanwhile, Nu, the albino, is working on his alchemy, staying up all night. The next morning, Maria asks Nos Froda if he is going to Gambo's workshop again. Takumi confirms it, as Camellia's locks and the carriage need repairs. Sophia worries because, ever since Papal ordered more refrigerators and potions, our boy has not rested for several days. Maria confirms this and asks him to take care of his health. However, our albino insists there's no need to worry. With that, he heads to the Adventurers Guild. There, Hans informs him that several people have reported seeing a monster in the suburbs, even showing him a sketch of the creature. Takumi then mentions that he came to register a familiar. Hans gets excited to see his second monster, as the first was a killer spider. So, Nos Pra summons Drac-Corel and also our Maple. Hans immediately recognizes the monster from somewhere, and upon comparing it with the sketch, he realizes what is really going on. A short-haired adventurer nearby confirms his suspicions. The guildmaster then approaches Nos Pra and tells him, "Come with me, little friend." Meanwhile, Sophia is out for a stroll. She went to talk to Mulan because she was looking for a slave to help Sakumi with his alchemy. Mulan tells her that she doesn't have any slaves with those skills, but promises to ask colleagues from other cities. Sophia thanks her. Mulan smiles and tells Sophia that she has changed, specifically since she met Takumi Iruma. Back in the present, Maria approaches Sophia as they walk, mentioning that Takumi has seemed tired lately. Because of this, She plans to visit the butcher shop to get him some good food, knowing how excited Nos Pra gets when creating things. Sophia expresses her desire to contribute, but since she can't help with alchemy, she at least wants to assist Maria in the kitchen. However, our orange-haired girl refuses, knowing how terrible Sophia is at cooking. Still, she points out that Sophia has changed. Sophia is surprised Mulan said the same thing. Maria describes how Sophia now occasionally shows a softer expression, though she is still as bold and wonderful as ever. This makes our elf blush, and she hurries Maria along to finish shopping and find Takumi. Meanwhile, at Gambo's workshop, our girls find the protagonist asleep, hugging a log. The blacksmith reassures them, saying that the albino works tirelessly, but when he sees how happy Takumi is while working, he can't bring himself to stop him. However, he warns them that if Takumi keeps up this pace, he will collapse from exhaustion, which obviously worries Sophia and Maria. The next day, the protagonist finally completes the carriage. He asks Maple to inform Camellia that she will be pulling the carriage. Maple also informs Drac Corel, who agrees. Maria is in awe, and she's not the only one. Sophia is also amazed, as the carriage interior is practically the size of a house. Nos Pra explains that he enchanted it with spatial expansion, showing them a map of the interior, where he placed his room near Sophia's. He also emphasizes that he worked on preventing tremors and shakes while traveling. The elf, hearing this, comments that there is no other carriage like it on the entire continent. Maria is thrilled, as it has everything she needs to cook, meaning she can continue working while traveling. She thanks the albino profusely. With that, they set off. Maria drives Camellia, and despite their high speed, Sophia is surprised that the inside of the carriage doesn't shake. Even her tea remains intact. Maria then calls out to Nosfrota, asking him to add some metal plates to the sides just to make it look cooler, like a real tracer. After traveling for several days, Camellia's stats have improved. They finally arrive at the meeting point with Lord Godwin, where they also learn that the Lion Fong group has been hired as escorts. The group is surprised to see a Drac Corel pulling the carriage. Just then, Peg arrives and Mr. Godwin, the chubby man, excitedly asks to see the interior of the new carriage. Upon seeing it, he is greatly surprised by its impressive features and demands more details, of course, offering to pay for them. He continues bombarding with questions until Mr. Godwin stops him with a smack, as he was only scaring poor Takumi. Papex realizes this and apologizes, while Godwin emphasizes that the carriage is magnificent. As a lord of some lands, he expresses his desire to travel in one. Takumi understands that he, too, wants a carriage like this. Mr. Godwin then mentions that he would gladly pay 100 platinum coins for one, which is equivalent to about 1 million yen. This leaves Albino in shock since it's an enormous amount of money. Thus, their journey to the royal capital of Baikat begins. Mr. Godwin acknowledges that Takumi will continue expanding his influence and, therefore, vows to protect him from evildoers, at least within the kingdom of Barcola. However, he cannot predict what other kingdoms, especially the Holy Empire of Sidonia, might do it. Several months after Takumi's time, we see Ake reading a book. The book states that the goddess Anat created humans in her image. Later, she created beast men from animals and elves from fairies to serve them. At that moment, a small demi-beast approaches Ake, who notices a servitude collar around her neck, which irritates him. We return to our protagonist, who is now very close to the royal capital and can see it in the distance. The group led by Leon mentions that this job was quite easy since Sophia, Maria, Maple, and Dr. Cell handled everything. Meanwhile, Papex tells Takumi that they will discuss things once they reach the inn. They suggest offering a carriage like his to the king so that he can better appreciate Takumi's talent. They inform him that the audience with ALD is in 5 days, and he can start working upon their return. However, Albino stops him, pointing out that he can build the carriage here. His only concern is finding a workshop to do it in. The chubby man gets excited and asks to be in charge of arranging it. They continue talking all afternoon. Later that night, our protagonist meets with Sophia and Maria, telling them about the Palm Company, which was recommended by Papex himself. Alpha remembers this because it's run by Mr. Burton, who, according to Mulan, has a good reputation in the capital. Takumi mentions that the company also has a spacious garden and that Papex has already prepared all the necessary materials. He begins reviewing the carriage's blueprint, and Sophia, slightly worried, warns him that he needs someone to help with its creation. Takumi acknowledges that they already help him a lot, but both Sophia and Maria are aware that they cannot assist with alchemy. Sophia emphasizes that if he doesn't take care of his own health, she won't be able to do anything to help. Takumi understands her concern and agrees to find a slave for assistance. Both women insist that it must be a female, to which he agrees. He arrives at the Palm Slave Company and is greeted by Mr. Palm Burton. Takumi requests a slave with alchemy skills. Burton asks if he is the one making carriages with adamantite and mithril, which Takumi confirms. Understanding this, Mr. Burton realizes that the slave must possess magical abilities. Meanwhile, Maria asks Sophia if she has seen Maple, as she was talking about exploring the building. Worried, the blonde sets off to find her, knowing she likely entered the mansion alone. She finds her scaring a demi-human, a fox girl. Sophia scolds Maple for not informing them of her whereabouts, but then reassures the frightened demi-human with a gentle smile. The girl mentions that the book she picked up is from the library, which contains many secondhand magic books, and well, this is recommended for learning the basics of division and recomposition. Then Takumi. He meets Sophia. No, wait, this is Alvin. He doesn't mention that he was looking for her since he is now going to see the candidate. Upon meeting the said person, we see that it's Reva, the same girl that Sophia previously ran into. Our protagonist explains what he does, but Reva is quite nervous. She doesn't know what to do if he rejects her as well. Then she hears him say that he would prefer if she knew something about alchemy and had an interest in it, which makes her happy. However, when she remembers the traumatizing words of her last potential client, she gets scared and sits down. At this moment, Mom Sophia intervenes and mentions that the girl has studied magic on her own, has read secondhand books on alchemy, and is also familiar with a book called something like Aller? No, that's not it. Takumi then corrects her, saying that the book is actually called The Complete Works of Alchemy by Arnold. The fox girl adds that this book is considered the basic foundation of alchemy. Our protagonist confirms this, and from that moment, they become engrossed in talking about alchemy. Seeing them, both Burton and Sophia think to themselves that these two are exactly alike, just as crazy about alchemy. Then, our protagonist decides to test her knowledge by asking her about a specific magic circle. First, she hesitates, thinking about it. She recognizes that it has something to do with material recomposition, heat, and shape transformation. But since she's not entirely sure, she replies that it resembles the formula for sweet spirals. She gets scared. If she's wrong, she'll be rejected again. At that moment, she starts crying, saying she doesn't know the exact answer because, in her homeland, they don't use light cream but rather be sweet honey. Our protagonist reassures her, telling her that from now on, he would love to have her around. This means she will be helping him with alchemy and possibly even joining him on adventures. Doubtful, she asks if her answer was correct. The albino protagonist confirms it, explaining that it was indeed an alchemical circle for sweet spirals and that the topping varies depending on the region. So her answer was actually correct. He even praises her for understanding it just by looking at it. Reva touches our protagonist's hand, emphasizing that she will do her best to do a great job. With Burton's help, they finalize the contract. Our protagonist informs her that she will receive a daily salary, with additional pay depending on her skills. She then asks if she can send all of her wages to her family. She explains that her village is very poor, and when she became a debt slave, she left money for her family, but that won't last forever. More importantly, she doesn't want her little brother to grow up in poverty. She wants him to go to school. Takumi, after hearing this, responds that she will remain a slave forever. Sophia interrupts, saying that she can accept the arrangement because if she learns alchemy from him, she will eventually gain the ability and skills to earn money on her own. More importantly, Sophia knows that serving Takumi might bring her even greater happiness. This embarrasses our protagonist, but he accepts Reva's request. When they arrive at the others, Reva is welcomed by Maria and Maple, who introduce themselves. And of course, they don't forget Camellia either. With such a warm welcome, Reva is happy, knowing that she will be fine here. Meanwhile, in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, after receiving a rejection from the Kingdom of Barcola, they know they must teach them a lesson the hard way. A chubby representative immediately suggests organizing a group of knights, but the princess stops them. She informs them that the kingdom needs more time to summon heroes and that it would be better to wait a few months instead of acting rashly. After all, the power of faith exists for this very reason, and for now, they will just spread the rumor that there are people who look down on the faith of divine light. The representative knows that this will anger the believers, and the princess mentions that it's not just that, because the divine squadron won't sit idly by either, putting on a real war magic face.